If you were to take a walk through a public park, a shopping mall, or even a grocery store today, you would hear something that, just 40 years ago, would have resulted in an immediate social sanction, a fine, or an ejection from the premises. I'm talking about the indiscriminate use of profanity. We live in an age where the four-letter word has moved from the docks and the barracks into the primetime sitcom, the corporate bedroom, and the elementary school playground. What was once considered the language of the gutter is now the soundtrack of the American mainstream. Today, we are analyzing the blind spot of our linguistic decay. We're going to trace the history of profanity, what it meant, why it was restricted, and how it was systematically dismantled in our media. Finally, we will look at this through a principled lens to understand why the words we choose matter far more than we are led to believe. Let's look at the war on language. Welcome to the Blind Spot. I'm Lydia. To understand the history of profanity, we first have to define what it actually is and why societies have historically restricted it. Traditionally, offensive language was not just bad words. It was a violation of the boundary between the common and the set apart. Historically, offensive language fell into three distinct buckets. The profane, traditionally this referred to taking something meant to be honored or sanctuary bound and treating it as common or dirty. The obscene is explicit vulgar references to private acts, and the crude was indecent references to bodily functions. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the first category was often considered the most socially disruptive because it struck at the shared foundations of the community. However, as Western civilization became more secularized, the shock value shifted. We moved away from social taboos regarding the sanctuary and towards taboos regarding the obscene. The blind spot here is that societies always have a hierarchy of what they consider unspeakable. Even today, as we claim to be liberated from linguistic rules, we've simply traded old taboos for new ones. In 2025, you can use the most vulgar sexual terms in public with little pushback, but violating the current social justice lexicon, using the wrong pronoun or an outdated term, is the new blasphemy. We haven't stopped having forbidden words. We've just traded words that honor tradition for words that honor modern political ideologies. For most of the 20th century, the media served as a firewall for the public square. There was a strict gatekeeping of language that protected the domestic environment from the vulgarity of the street. In the early days of film, the Hays Code governed Hollywood from 1934 to 1968. It explicitly forbade pointed profanity and sexual vulgarity. The goal was to ensure that cinema remained a space suitable for all citizens, upholding a standard of public decorum. The shift happened slowly, then all at once. In 1939, the film Gone with the Wind caused a national scandal because of a single use of a mild four-letter word in the final scene. The studio was actually fined for it. However, by the late 1960s, the code was replaced by the MPAA rating system. This shifted the responsibility from what is allowed to be said to who is allowed to hear it. Television held the line longer. Through the 70s and 80s, broadcast standards kept the 7 dirty words off the airwaves. But the advent of cable television and as the 90s emerged, realized they could use vulgarity as a marketing tool. They labeled it prestige drama and gritty realism. The blind spot is the normalization effect. Once a word is heard 1,000 times on a television screen in a cool or serious context, the human brain stops registering it as a violation. We have bracketed our way into a culture where there is no longer a distinction between adult language and public language. Perhaps the most significant cultural shift isn't what we see on the screen, but how we behave in person. For centuries, Western society operated on the concept of mixed company. It was a social rule that recognized different settings required different standards. Certain language was reserved for private, informal settings among peers, the barracks, the factory floor, or the docks. It was never used in the presence of women, children, or in public settings like a marketplace or a town hall. This wasn't about repression. It was about self-restraint and linguistic chivalry. It signaled that the speaker had the character to filter their impulses based on respect for those around them. The radical cultural shifts of the late 20th century viewed these boundaries as artificial or hypocritical. The new goal became authenticity, the idea that you should be able to say whatever you feel, regardless of your environment. Today, we see the results of this collapse. We see professionals using vulgarity in corporate emails, parents swearing in front of toddlers, and politicians using profanity as a substitute for an actual argument. When we lose the ability to filter our speech, we lose a primary component of civilization, the ability to prioritize the comfort and respect of the community over our own immediate impulses. And as we bring this episode to a close, we must look at the spiritual reality of our words. While the secular world views profanity as a matter of freedom of expression, the Christian worldview recognizes it as a matter of the heart. Jesus tells us in Matthew 12:34 that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. Profanity is rarely just empty air. It's often a symptom of a heart that lacks peace, a mind that lacks discipline, or a spirit that has lost its sense of reverence. A growing and troubling blind spot in our current culture is the rise of Christian podcasters and content creators who use profanity in their videos and social media posts. Often this is done in an attempt to appear relevant, edgy, or authentic. However, we must ask, what are we actually signaling? In Ephesians 4:29, we are given a clear standard. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. When those who claim the name of Christ use the language of the gutter, it can become a significant stumbling block for new Christians who are trying to turn away from their old way of life. Furthermore, it serves as a deterrent for non-Christians. Ironically, many who do not follow Christ still hold believers to a higher standard of conduct. When they see a Christian creator using vulgarity, it often reinforces a narrative of hypocrisy rather than one of transformation. If our speech is indistinguishable from the world's most vulgar elements, we have surrendered a key part of our witness. Reclaiming our speech isn't about being legalistic. It's about acknowledging that we serve a God of order. Our language should reflect the dignity of the image bearers we are speaking to. When we clean up our language, we aren't just following a rule. We are practicing the self-governance required of a follower of Christ. Linguistic decay is always the precursor to social decay. If we want a more respectful, orderly society, we have to start with the words we allow to come across our lips. Thank you for watching. Please support this content by engaging with the video. Like, share, subscribe, follow. To offer more direct support and to join our book club launching on January 5th, visit patreon.com, the Blindspot podcast, to view the details and choose your focus level. I look forward to seeing you in my next video on the history of the song Hail Columbia. Have a great day and keep searching to find your focus.